the part of the discussion that I was going to talk about is in relation to the work that Rowe Price, which is a global investment company that has 16 offices around the globe and is based in Baltimore. And in April of 2015, there was uprising and unrest in Baltimore that was very globally known, certainly nationally known. And Rowe as a company started to ask the questions of how do we get involved in West Baltimore, but first and foremost began looking around the world and the country to see how had corporations been partners in communities that had had unrest. And so from our standpoint, we did a lot of, we spoke with funders around the globe, lots of efforts within the United States, sat down with leaders in Northern Ireland and other places to kind of learn at what is a good way for companies to partner in community. And ultimately we came up with values that we thought that are important, but also came up against where philanthropy and where companies often get it wrong as they partner in community. And so I'll just quickly address what I believe are 5 or 6 of those important points. As all of my colleagues have said, you can contact me now, 10 years from now, or they didn't say that, but I'll say that, and they'll probably say it too. Connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm certainly happy to connect with you after. But the first thing that we knew that was really important and that we had heard in endless numbers of community meetings was that bedside manner is really important, and it's an area where often corporations and companies and philanthropy get it wrong. And so if you ask community folks that live in neighborhoods what their challenge is with companies and philanthropy, they often will say that they felt like philanthropy didn't listen to them, or that philanthropy came in and helicoptered in with an initiative that was important to them, but wasn't respected or driven by community. And so from our standpoint, it was really important to make sure that in any way that our company, and as we notice many companies struggle with this, in partnering with community, that it was less about us and more importantly about community. I played offensive lineman in college. An offensive lineman for football is the least noticed position on the football field. Not to use football references too much. But the idea is it's not philanthropy or corporation's job as it relates to community efforts to be out in front before community. And so bedside manner counts. And so many of you, if you think corporations think all of the time about what their interaction is with their client or their customer, the same kind of feeling and bedside manner needs to be thought of in terms of how it relates and how it connects within community. And part of that is making sure that if philanthropy is involved, that we're removing barriers that cause organizations to not be able to get there. I certainly think that financial health is really important, but oftentimes companies, if they practice looking at financial health barriers, or financial health, that becomes a barrier to entry for organizations being able to apply and partner with companies. And so we think it's really important to think about what is the access to relationships to companies, and what is the role of on our end to break down those barriers to have more meaningful partnerships at the community level. The second one, and it relates to, is community has to lead. They are out in front. It is not as important for the company to get its name on things as it is for community change to happen. And any of the initiatives that we do in West Baltimore and other communities, many of them you'll never see our name. And so it's unbelievably important that sometimes CSR does not become how important it is for you to recognize our CSR efforts, as important as it is to make sure that community change happens without name recognition. The third one is that we realized is, and this relates to my prior work in my former life, is that organizational health is more important and is a stronger determinant of what happens in community than program impact numbers. And so the idea of looking at organizations, and I remember working in a number of different countries where the focus of philanthropy was all on counting things and how much impact can you receive. And while I'm not suggesting that the social issues that you're working around, that there shouldn't be change on that, what we do realize on the corporate side is if you're going to have good corporate results, if you only focused on product, you'd be in real trouble. And so the idea, and it's the same as it relates to organizations, is that if you don't focus on organizational health and fund organizational health, the question was, you got to fund finance? Well, philanthropy has to give money for that. And we have to not only be bean counters for program impact, but be more centered on the idea that we're building strong organizations. So for example, funding strategy, thinking about strategy. 90% of nonprofit strategy, according to Bain, fails. And so if the idea is that strategic plans are not working, why is that? Well, the reason is, and a number of different reasons. One is that organizations don't have the apparatus to make strategy work. And so you need to fund apparatus to make strategy work. The second one, and what we realize, is that overhead. There's been a drive for overhead to be rethought. We do organizational health assessments that our communities get to receive, in which we assess financial health. And we found that organizations that had overhead rates between 26 and 31% had stronger organizational outcomes and stronger programmatic outcomes. So if you see a funder that says to you, I want you to have under 20% overhead, you need to tell them, thank you, but no thank you. That is not a partnership for you. So the idea is part of the work that you're doing in partnership with philanthropy needs to be the idea that they need to pay, if you want that partnership, for the organizational health of those organizations. The third area or fourth area is organizations are measuring lots of stuff, but they're not adaptive. And so what is the use for every January if I step on the scale and say I need to not be pear-shaped, but yet I don't change anything that I do in order to do that? Organizations need to be adaptive, and that also means that they have to have the organizational health to be able to do that. We have assessed hundreds of organizations and our grantees for their own empowerment, and have found that organizations are not adaptive. So it doesn't matter if they count lots of stuff. If you can't help them be able to change what they're doing, then impact doesn't mean anything. The final area that I would mention is that funders and philanthropy and CSR and companies and communities all need to try and become learning organizations. And that means learning together. And so what that means is not, the power dynamic, as you all will know from philanthropy to community, can be a barrier. And often philanthropy is the cause for that. And the idea is, how do you create mutually beneficial directions that you're trying to see in community, and that you're learning together and adapting together. And that's really important. And the one point I wanted to make is, I did my doctoral work on the relationship between government and nonprofits. One of the things that we found is, one is that philanthropy, and especially corporate philanthropy, is often filling the gaps that government is not. And that is not the best use of philanthropic dollars. Philanthropic dollars should be government enhancers. And so what that means is, for nonprofits, as they begin to think about their relationship to government, is talking about what can my dollars be, or what philanthropy especially, what can the philanthropic dollars be to be value adds to government dollars as compared to gap fillers. And as you think about that relationship between government and philanthropy, you should be thinking the same thing. So thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing you.